Thank you so much. We will continue. So thank you, Getty, for the first part. I would encourage you all to be part of the discussion. So make sure that you propose your questions to all the panelists, and we will, yes, explore the future. What if a country is truly digital? What are the new challenges, new opportunities for the government, but for the digital society as a whole? So post-digital government requires organizations to reset their ambition and focus on their public purpose. And Artur, you as the business area director for Nortel in Middle East and Africa, how would you describe the future of the government services, and what are the benefits that people will get from it?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, good afternoon from my side. It's a pleasure to be here, so thank you so much for having me. It's so great to share the stage with the experts. Now, for the future of the government services, so our vision for the future of government services is something that we call personal government. And as the name implies, this is basically about government providing personalized experience to all the citizens. And to be really true to the concept, it's better to explain this future of the government services from the perspective of the citizen and not from the perspective of the governmental bureaucracy. And I would say that the previous panelists in their wrap-up basically already provided their point of view, but kind of to structure it a little bit, right? So in our vision, the future government services have 5 key characteristics. So first of all, they're human-centric, they're citizen-centric, which means that the services are designed from perspective of the citizen, from their data, from their contextual obligations, contextual benefits, and hiding away everything else, and hiding away the whole complexity of the governmental bureaucracy, hiding away the complexity of the service provision channel, service provision pipeline, and those are the services where sometimes, potentially multiple public authorities, agencies are involved in the provision of the service, and also sometimes maybe involving third-party private sector service providers within the same service provision channels. But all these complexities basically hidden away, and the citizen just sees, his possibilities, his objectives, and his obligations, and that's it. Second of all, the services are accessible. So services are accessible and inclusive. So services are provided to the citizens through the channels, through the tools, through the methods, which are basically convenient to them, without discriminating against, certain population groups based on their socio-demographic factors and the features, based on their education, digital level, digital skill level, or the language, right? The next one is the proactiveness. So basically services we envision to be proactive, which means that the services make themselves available for the citizen depending on the certain life events, right? And it can be something as major as the birth of the child, start of the education, start of the business, but it also can be something as minor as, road construction and the closure of the roads next to where the person lives. And the next one is the trustworthiness of the services. So basically, citizens trust the service in terms of, anticipated outcome of the service and in terms of service use of the data. And that is delivered through basically simple and transparent explanation of how the data is used by the service, and possibility of for the citizen to actually adjust the privacy settings to the ones that he or she is actually convenient with. And lastly, the services are empowering, which means that in exchange for the trust and exchange for the data, services are actually generating added value to the citizens. Just a few examples is recommendations on improving the financial discipline, or adjusting, the lifestyle, adjusting the diet, on some other behavioral patterns. So that I would say like 5 key characteristics of the future of the government services.
but how to make it work in practice. So, Siim, you are considered to be one of the leaders for digital government globally. You have worked for the government, being responsible for executing those reforms. How to make a good vision and how to put the strategy in place and then also to execute this.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Ms. Kaisk. Well, I'll actually continue from where Artur sort of stopped in a way. So, I mean, these are amazing services if we can build them this way, right? To get there, there's so much of the machinery of government that needs to change for that.
Yeah.
I mean, and not only in the classic sense of how do you coordinate different silos of different agencies together. I mean, there's that element as well, but even all the way to the point, for example, that like, you know, what's the funding model of all of that? I mean, these sort of services, they work only if there's continuous improvement happening. Like none of the service will be built to meet all the 5 criteria in Big Bang like that, in one project funded by the World Bank. No, it's continuous effort, continuous funding, etc. Secondly, so if you talk about the machinery of government, exactly, that is the reasons why that in my role as a government CI, I always saw that, look, I'm not in charge of digital stuff. People do that, other people do that. Fundamentally, we're in charge of figuring out how the machinery of our government really can help to make these reforms happen. How do we change the funding models? By the way, the jury is out there. I don't think any country in the world has cracked the funding model yet. We all still are too much project-based from one gig to another, sort of. So we still need to figure that out. Procurement. How do we really work with private sector, with the startups, I mean, or in-house for that matter. But fundamentally, what's the procurement model that actually allows us to be agile enough, right? And then to build, again, these services on a constant basis and improve them like that. Another machinery is, let's say, well, the whole of governance. Again, so now go to the coordination side. What are the steering mechanisms you use in terms of, like, how do you get all the agencies on board? For example, to build really personalized service across 3 agencies. If one of them resists, what's your lever? Is it budget somehow? Is it somehow channel control? Is it somehow the political weight and the influence? Is it the committee you need? The sort of setup will be different from country to country. And in that sense, a lot of the work we do now in Digital Nation with governments is you really co-creating and designing these mechanisms for these governments, because exactly will be unique to them. You can copy and try and learn from the principles, but in a way you always create them anew. And the last thing, perhaps beyond just like the sort of steering part, I mean, a lot of it also comes down to, frankly, community building. So, I mean, a lot of these sort of services will be created if frankly, if the government gets along with each other. So in that sense, a lot of what we have to do with the machinery of government is like the soft things, not the next committee, but perhaps a good party. So, and I mean, bringing these communities together. In Estonia, we started really bringing all the government agencies and like the leaders, not even the techies only, but exactly the actual leaders of administration, locking them 2 days into the forest, having a good sauna, and afterwards things got moving. In Mexico, you need a good party. In Middle East, you need basically like a fancy festive event with a lot of awards. Whatever does it take in your context, but bringing this community spirit, building like the soft things that you have a common alignment on the direction, and a common commitment and work and collaboration, even that matters in a way, and that you can design for. And my last point on this is to say, look, if we go around the world, everybody says, yes, it's the change management that matters, but it's like lip service. So I think a lot of the, how to get from vision to really the delivery is that you have to plan for this change. Change management you have to plan for. If you don't do it properly, systematically every day, it's not going to happen by itself.
And it takes time.
And it takes time.
Yeah, you talked about the community building. I think it's also very important to build the community among different governments. So that is why this type of conference is excellent, so that we can share what has been done and learn from each other. Previous panel dreamed of what is the post-digital government for themselves, and I would also say that I want to travel to Kenya and go to the pharmacy and buy out the medicine that was prescribed for me by Estonian doctor, but this requires data exchange, this requires interoperability. So Maxim, I will now turn to you. so how do we get from most countries status quo in the future that we envisage so that government authorities who usually are siloed actually would talk and exchange data between themselves?
Yeah, well, I think there are good examples already to learn from. Like, well, if you go to Kenya, I think you won't be able to access your pharmacy records, but if you go to Finland, for example, you will be able to. If you go to the hospital in Finland, there is interoperability between two X-Road instances, for example. Also, if we look a bit, like if we zoom out a bit, if we look at the European Union picture as a whole, there are tools that enable exchange of data in certain domains. Like, same example, the pharmacies. I think most of the European countries are now exchanging those e-prescription data using the tool called e-delivery. That's one of the building blocks of those, European Union designed data exchange. If we look at the future, then, well, they say that one of the superpowers, or maybe the main superpower of European Union, is bureaucracy. Like, European Union is very good at regulating things. And, if we're looking at the bureaucracy and where we're moving in this domain, then European Union has designed a concept called data rooms, and X-Road in Estonia is moving towards that direction. So we will soon have a proof of concept solution, and there will be a possibility to exchange data in certain domains. So there will be like a separate domain for education, separate domain for healthcare, and for other things. And I think this is something that others could also learn from. Well, we will see, because it's a new concept. We will see how it will work out. We don't know that ourselves yet, but maybe, this is something. Well, if it flies, then maybe this is something that the other, let's say, other communities, the other parts of the world can look into. So you may have met, or you may have heard Lesinakone from the Smart Africa. So that's his one of the dreams, to have this interoperability for all the African countries, for all the members of the African Union. I think right now, in Africa, we have some countries that are very, basically very advanced in sense of data quality, interoperability. The examples that I can bring are Rwanda and Benin. I'm sure there are more. That's two countries where I had practical experience. But yet there are countries, some countries are lagging behind. So before they can talk about in data exchange between countries, interoperability between countries, these the levels of maturity in that sense have to be aligned. So there are some prerequisites that have to be made. But we'll see what comes out of it, because Smart Africa has great initiatives.
Yeah, thank you for those thoughts. This reminded me a bit of also one of the projects, or one of the initiatives that I believe is something that the government, who is in post-digital sphere already, or who has digitalized already most of their government registries, should think of, and this is called Data Embassy. So not only relying on the infrastructure you have on your premises, but also to use extra computing power to store your data, and to be able to function regardless what happens on your own territory. And Estonia was the first country who launched the Data Embassy between Estonia and Luxembourg, Luxembourg being the host state. But it's not only about hosting data, but also keeping your operations live when something happens on your territory, and having the privileges and the immunities the same as you could have from your traditional embassy. So this is also an interesting concept what many governments have now followed. We see Ukraine, we see Bahrain, Lithuania thinking about it and following it. So I think learning from each other is definitely crucial. But there is one very interesting question from the audience, and it is about privacy and convenience. So as we move into the post-digital area, how do we achieve the delicate balance between citizen privacy and the convenience those automated services promise? And can you perhaps expand upon how privacy settings can be customized? I know that probably you will think that me as a lawyer should answer the question, but I want to throw the ball to you first. So maybe Siim from like a policy perspective.
Well, obviously, well, from policy perspective, again, we have to go back to our Estonian roots for a second. I mean, Estonian case has always been that, look, how do you strike that balance? You let people decide. It's the personal management of data that you have to figure out. And by the way, it's not that Estonian. When we had the European Union presidency, 2017, I mean, that was declared to be like a shared vision for all the European countries. And I mean, even GDPR, for that matter, is built really that you can, manage your data, you can allow sharing for data, you can basically have people take that sort of control and ownership. But beyond policy, I just want to go to one point that I really fundamentally believe on that note. So if we believe that people should be able to manage this stuff more, consent management itself is becoming a building block. On top of the X-roads, I mean, all the other elements are next to them in a way, right? And that's an amazing way how to strike this balance.
Definitely. I think like opting in, opting out is also an option, and also in Estonian case, I can show my medical records and I can hide them, but it depends then what level of service I want to get. There is one more very interesting question regarding small island developing states. So they may face significant challenges in digitalizing public services. There is limited infrastructure, limited budget, of course, limited skills of limited skilled professionals. And given those challenges, then what are the crucial prerequisites needed to successfully start this process and ensure this sustainable growth? I would say community, I would say working together, but maybe you have something to add, Artur, maybe.
Yeah, I think like obviously, the most common prerequisites and something that was discussed is basically digitization of services end to end, but obviously, it's not achieved everywhere, and probably it should not, it doesn't make sense to wait before starting with the basically next activities on, achieving end-to-end digitization. So there are new technological capabilities, right, with emerging technologies, with AI that are already available today, and those are really, easy and cheap to utilize, to apply. There are means of, utilizing the human and the citizen centricity as a principle, also to, not fully digitize services. And I think that would probably be, the way to go, to start, applying the principles, and then in the meantime, continue the kind of also the digitization of the services in full.
Yeah, I would also add that, well, Estonia, well, I was quite young at the end of 90s, but Estonia, I know that Estonia wasn't rich back then. I mean, it's like, Estonia also had to count every cent of money. But if you do the math, if you calculate, like, you will get back your investment. It will return to you. You will save more than you spent. So yeah, there are many, practical ways how to get this initial investment, and then, if you apply this in a right way, you will get this money back, and you will save. So yeah.
Do you want to add something, Siim?
Well, in interest of time, really briefly. First of all, I mean, again, the concrete journey is always context specific, and I mean, the way that the post-digital government can look like as well, even in terms of even technology, the stack will be different. I mean, you may and you can rely way more on sort of cloud-based solutions than we were able to do back in the day here, right? Or that big countries choose to, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have to build everything yourselves. Secondly, I mean, already mentioned the building blocks, the things you can reuse. I mean, go to some of the, small islands like, Trinidad and Tobago, for example, these days, right? I mean, they take up digital public infrastructure. I mean, happens to be Estonian X-road, but now with the help of some other Estonians, they actually now are making it theirs, right? So they're reusing what else is there and what works. But fundamentally, it comes down to the smaller you are, the more it matters, like, what's the political and what's the actual drive for the country. If they put their act together, that's when stuff can happen in a country big or small.
We have talked of best practices. So Maxim, you pointed out some examples, but maybe also Artur, to you. Have you experienced examples of post-digital era of those equitable and sustainable public services?
I think, like generally speaking, having the experience of Estonian digital infrastructure as a sort of a benchmark, and experiencing other nations' digital services, like I have to say that for the most part is quite a frustrating experience. But nevertheless, what I have observed in GCC is that certain principles are applied again in the context of not fully digitized or not digitized services, and there are certain things that they do pretty well in terms of integrating both the public service provider and the private service providers into the same service chain. And even though the service is not end-to-end digitized, but from the perspective of the consumer, of the citizens, it's actually quite a convenient experience. So I would say that again, repeating maybe like my last message is that quite often you can apply this citizen centricity principle to implementation and design of the services also in not fully digitized environment, and that's actually provide a pretty good experience, as compared to what it would have been without it.
But Siim, what are some of the latest developments in making the post-digital vision a reality? So can you draw some good examples from all over the world? So we have all worked globally, but...
Well, first of all, governments call these things with different names,
Yeah.
but in the end it's sort of the same things that get thrown around, right? So for example, I mean, personal government, as Artur has outlined, this is, some people say it's seamless or effortless or whatever, right?
Proactive.
Proactive, everything else like that. Doesn't matter in a way if the cat is black or white. The way it works, or the hunts the mice, that matters. My point that what we still see clearly is countries aging in that direction, both those who have already been more advanced digitally before, as well as those who are starting their remission now. What to me seems to be the biggest sort of trend in a way is like the life event sort of thinking, right? So basically bringing end to end the personalized needs of the citizens together. I mean, some countries start on this from informational point of view. That was, New Zealand. That was a lot of Singapore at first, like back in the early days. Some countries go further and really try to bring like 360 of the citizen together in terms of data and actual end-to-end service, right? I mean, all the way to what, even Uruguay has done, for example, if you jump to Latin America. That's one thing. Secondly, the proactive part is really the key part. And I'm here, my own very subjective view is that too few governments really do this properly. It has to do probably, I guess, for the reasons that too few...
Who are those few?
I'll get to that. Too few really also have the ability to combine and exchange data. And I think this is, for that matter, that's really the beginning block. But it's getting there. And second, it's also like a design issue. So, I mean, proactive service really comes from the point of view of like, how do you envision, really, how do you build a design service to work like that, not just the technology of that. I mean, proactive services, here a bit of the Nordics, I think, sort of lead the way. Again, it's a bit of like quite a Nordic thinking that, hey, let's make stuff easier, like, like they have tried in Finland, for example. Denmark, for that matter, right? So the stuff is happening, and exactly, it doesn't matter what is the buzzword, but the direction seems to be exactly on that. And I think, in a sense of post-digital, like, a lot of visions of governments on digital agendas are too digital in themselves. Actually, should be about the experience. And so, what does post-digital government mean to me? It's basically about somehow setting an ambition for what is the good experience for people in this country.
And I think with those words, it would be nice to actually conclude our panel. So I hope you got some interesting insights. What will the future look like? What are the challenges, but also the opportunities for governments, but also maybe private sector companies who are closely working together with the government and actually helping to shape this digital society we are looking for. I would like to thank you, my dear panelists, for this interesting discussion.